recording. That's cool. Fun. Twitch. Get the URLs for these. Dum-de-dum. Hello, everybody. If you're waiting for me to start, I just want to make sure I post my stuff on Blue Sky or whatever. And then I'll just hit live, and then we'll go live. I like the idea of just hanging out while you're coding on something anyway. That's going to be the vibe of this channel for a minute. Sweet. Burp. Sent message. Close chat. Merp. Live. Somebody say something if it's working. That would be useful. Check, check. Say anything. All right, but I've also hit record on this thing because it might be useful to just see at a later time. Like, is it useful to then re-upload it to YouTube in a more compressed way or something like that? Anyway, so we're looking at some code and a demo. Right on. Yeah, using CodePen's new editor here. And again, like I said, what I wrote down as like a sketch note, because sometimes I'm like, oh, you know what would be interesting is to like define a grid and then make the grid template columns, like a 2-column grid like we're looking at here. One of them is 50%, 50%, one of them's auto, and one of them's 1FR, 1FR. I feel like a lot of us, when we learned grid, it was like, oh, you just use these FR units and that's, you know, what makes the grid. But of course, there's lots of different ways to define a grid, and there's like reasons for them all. And like, I think I understand it mostly, but do I actually? And maybe we could make a testing tool to play with it and kind of check some stuff out. So again, that's the plan. I'm going to kind of close some of this so you can see what's going on. I have this div with class of grids. I can't tell. I don't have a good sense yet on streaming of like what's a good font size and stuff, because what's enough room and all that. But if it has a class of grid, then it has display grid on it. So here's grid, and then I just needed another hook. So there's grid 1, grid 2, grid 3, grid 4, grid 5. Maybe we can add some more too as we play around with more ways of defining grid columns. And I think this defines like why I think it might be confusing to some people immediately, is because all these different ways of defining this 2-column grid is, look what you get. A 2-column grid. Guess what what size both grids are? they're the same size. It like does the same thing. So there's all these different ways to define these grids. So here's this, I know I jumped ahead a little bit, but I was verifying that this would be interesting in any way. Like I said, the class of grid has display grid on it. There may or may not be a gap. We'll play with that in a little bit. And that's this bottom area. And I've started to give myself some controls here because I think messing with these controls might end up messing with what's going on in these grids, and that'll be interesting to document. Maybe we'll make like a readme.md or something that maybe readme is not appropriate. Rename interesting notes. And if we think of something interesting, we'll put it in the interesting notes, and that'll be cool. So I guess, the other thing we could do is just write it in the pen description. But I guess that's in a modal, whereas this is just more nicely integrated into it. So maybe we'll move one to the other or something like that. All right, so and then these dotted outlines on the divs that are inside these grids. So if you see a dotted outline in it, then it's a grid cell, and it's sitting either in column 1 or in column 2. Again, these are all the same. So what is grid 1 like? Well, it's using grid template columns 50%, 50%. Brian in chat is asking if this is CodePen projects or the new editor. This is the new 2.0 editor in kind of a private beta status, or almost. So if you want in on that, shoot me an email or something. We can talk about it. But yeah, I just like using it, and streaming's a way to show it off a little bit, particular features and stuff. Okay, so grid number 1 is 50%, 50%. Grid number 2 is auto, and they're labeled here, so you can see them in the preview as well. The little text above each grid is what the 2 columns are set to, and they're always both identical. Like the column 1 and column 2 are the same. They don't always have to be, but they are for now. So maybe we just focus on the first 3 for now. And I think one of the reasons this can be confusing too is what I've put inside it is this, just text node that just has very little text. So I think that's immediately one of the issues when you're playing with grid, is that if you just put nothing inside of it and set it up, it might look right. And then you put a whole bunch of stuff inside of it, and it starts not doing what you want it to do. So that's what this update content button is about. We'll get to it in a second, but I thought like we could just keep adding different states. So very little text is the first state, but then we could click the button and we'll replace it with like a whole bunch of text on the left and less text on the right. And then state number 3 is we'll put a big image in there. And by big, I mean it's 400 pixels wide, which is wider than this is rendering now, and just still very little text on the right-hand side. How do the grids behave in those situations depending on how we've set up the columns of the grid? So maybe we should invent some more states and stuff too, but very little text so far. Straight up and down, it's all exactly the same. Okay, so starting with 50%, 50%, how do we mess it up a little bit? What's the first like surprising behavior that happens with this? And I think, you can probably guess it. When I say 50%, I am setting a very hard width. I'm setting 50% of the size of the container. And as soon as I add gap to it, yeah, dude, what's up, Andy? Straight up showing it. Can have access to if you want to see it. I think if I tweeted the actual template, I think there's still some bugs, or it may not render this preview for anonymous users yet. So I'm like hesitant on that, but for the most part, it's fine. All right, so in the first grid, 50%, 50%, we've had a kind of a grid blowout already. So it's pretty rare to see columns set like this, which I think is a little confusing. Like, why don't we? Isn't usually a percentage, like that's the squishy one. It should be fluid width, 50%, 50%. Why is it busting out of the side? Well, it's 50%, 50% plus the gap. And it just doesn't know, that's just not how grids work. It doesn't just, it's saying this column is gonna be 50% of the parent widths wide. It's not like, oh, okay, unless there's gap and then I'll shrink down a little bit. It just doesn't roll like that. So that's what kind of sucks about setting columns in that way. It's kind of the same as if we were to set, and this is totally possible too, and there's reasons to do so, but if we just set like the 2 columns to be exact pixel widths too, why isn't that refreshing? That those 2 columns would just be exactly that wide. it's kind of the same as doing it with percentages. I think that's a little weird. I think that's almost an interesting note, like setting a column with in percentages is a, I don't know, hard fixed width that doesn't change based on most stuff. So I think that's kind of interesting. But look at all the rest of the versions of them, and I'll put it back. Let's change it back to what it was: 50%, 50%. Auto was cool with it. Auto filled the space of the column, and then even if there's a gap, the gap is like taking away from the size of the column. 1FR is taking away from the size of the column. So kind of interesting. Straight up and down the rest of them. So the only one that exhibited interesting behavior is this. I did put at the very bottom, the one that looks the most complicated is actually, in a way, it's some of the less complicated. It's just to showcase how ridiculous it has to be if we had to be, as designers, developers, in charge of our own gap. So instead of just saying 50%, 50%, it's saying, well, make them 50%, 50%, but then divide the gap by 2 and set the columns that way. So like, because that sucks so much, that line of code that you can see here, taking care of our own gaps has always sucked. Especially because there's like, well, there's 2 columns, but there's only 1 gap. And I don't know, the math always gets weird. Like, what if there's 8 columns, there's 7 gaps? And doing all that math has always been a little obnoxious. Hence, we have the property gap and we don't have to do it ourselves, which is pretty great. So this does work. If we wanted to manage the gaps ourselves and still use percentage units, we can. And is there ever a reason to do that? I don't know. Maybe there is, because sometimes setting like a hardcore width like that, and like it's like almost like a level of sturdiness. Like this column is going to be extremely sturdy. It will just be that width. If something needs to overflow it, it's just going to have to do that. It's not going to end up stretching the thing. Let's take a look at what I mean by stretching it a little bit, though. Let's see. I'm just going to hit this. Maybe I'll just refresh this window real quick so it's back to the normal state, and I'll hit update content. Again, hitting update content here is going to swap out the text for a long paragraph in the first column and a shorter paragraph in the second one. Oops, no, it didn't do that. 3-1 to the images. Let's do the paragraph one first, though. I think that's a little bit extra interesting. So, long paragraph, short paragraph. Not surprising that 50%, 50% just maintains it perfectly nicely here in a way, because it's sturdy. 50% is saying it's absolutely going to be that size no matter what, and they're both going to be that size, and that's just going to be the way it is. But auto immediately kind of loses that half and half ability. And auto, I wonder if there's a good description of it that's better than me just mouth blogging it or something. There probably is. Find auto. Is there a good MDN description of just what that value might mean? I don't know. There's probably somewhere on. Oh yeah, here it is. As a maximum, represents the largest max content size of the items in that track. As a minimum, it represents the largest minimum size in that track. So I guess it's saying, it's probably pretty complicated to write out with min and max. But it's related to the max content and min content. That's how auto works. I also think of it as, it's used as the word intrinsic comes up. It's like, what is the intrinsic size of it? Okay, then balance it with other things, intrinsic size. But intrinsic size is a weird word, because it's like, what is that? And what is the intrinsic size of a paragraph, especially a paragraph that's essentially like fighting the intrinsic side of another paragraph? Like, what decides that this one's just going to be a little wider than this one? And the answer to that is, I don't freaking know, dude. I have no idea like what that is. And what if this is twice as long? If this is twice as long and we get back into this state, is it like twice as powerful? Is the intrinsic size? No, it's like the same amount as more powerful. I don't know what's deciding. Is it like the length of individual words? Is it like how it wraps a little bit? Is it just because it's more characters? Does the language have something to do with it? I don't know. I don't think it's like that huge of a problem. I just think it's particularly weird when it has to do with text because it just feels unpredictable. I don't see it used in that case very much. Using auto on a column that's going to contain something that's more predictable, like an image, might make more sense. But when it's just text, it's like, what is auto even doing here? No idea. Yeah, like Paul's saying in chat, it just means like do whatever you like. It's kind of like that, but there is rhyme to the reason. It's just not like super duper known to us, I guess. Yeah, a little more rare to see. Maybe an interesting notes will be like, when is a good time to use auto? Is it, for example, when you put an image in a column and want the intrinsic size of the image to determine the column width? I could see that, one of those kind of media objects with a like avatar on the left and username on the right. You want the first column to be just as wide as the avatar is, but you don't want to deal with float and all that stuff. Possibly auto is a good use case there, but that'd be interesting to kind of write up, like when is auto a good idea? Yeah, Andrew's saying I use it all the time with auto 1FR. Yeah, I could see that the auto 1FR feels like the media object kind of way to go. Text, pretty weird though. We kept seeing those images, so we could go with that next. I think this showcases it nicely. Again, 50%, 50% with an image that's 400 pixels wide within it. It's just going to overflow. It's overflowing that column, but we can still see the dots there. So the column's like, I literally don't even care what the content inside me is. If it's less, it's less. If it's more, it's more. That's your problem kind of thing. Interesting. I don't think gap's going to affect that very well. It's still going to blow out, but that's that. And here we're showcasing that auto behavior. This column has like no choice but to be the size of the image that's inside of it. And it just so happens, I guess there's just enough room to smash the other column into it. But I bet it will happily kind of push the entire parent wider if it absolutely had to. Let's test that, right? So in the image that gets used, let's make it like 500 pixels wide instead. So that's what comes down from it. Hopefully this will re-render quick and we'll kick over to this. Yeah, so that red line I put there, which is just a border right on the grids there. And the center line is just also a stupid little trick. I'm sure this could be done more efficiently, but the center line is just a linear gradient that goes to 1 pixel before the 50th percentile and draws down the middle or whatever. Cool. Yeah, it's like it had no choice here. It was really strong-handed, and like the intrinsic size of this image is wider even than the entire parent, and that's just how wide it's going to be. And it's also not allowed to wrap or anything like that. It has to be 2 horizontal columns, so it's pushing that horizontal column even wider. It just has to. It has no ability to do otherwise. Now, we haven't looked very much at 1FR, but it's kind of doing the same thing. Like this column feels like it's like not allowed to be any smaller than the intrinsic size of the content within it. So it just has to behave like that. We haven't even set it in this thing at all, but the FR is like a fractional unit. It was pretty much invented just for grid. I don't think it's used anywhere other than grid, right? I'm pretty sure that's true. And the way to think about it is like the leftover space. So that can be kind of interesting. Maybe we should make some grids that use different things, but like just to mouth blog it for a minute. Let's say we got a column that was auto 1FR, and the first one was, a 50 pixel image inside. Cool. So now we have all the width of the container, and we have all of that except for 50 pix to use. 1FR will be like half of the remaining space, or 2FR 3FR means it'll be like 2/5 of the remaining space and 3/5 of the remaining space. But as you can see, it's like, it's not super strong. It's like medium strong, which is how I think about it, I guess. A 1FR column is not, it's not as like sturdy as a percentage is. It still can be busted out bigger if it needs to. And often doesn't like have permission to be smaller. So that's what this next one is when we start looking at and thinking about this stuff. Is a pattern I use pretty frequently with columns is to, and if you're going to use fractional units, set the fractional unit, but allow it to be smaller too. Maybe 0 is too small, maybe set it to 50 pixels or something, like as small as you'd ever want that column to render, but you're kind of like giving permission for that column to be smaller if it needs to be. Which I think is interesting. So right now we're still having this problem with the first image like breaking out of this container much. But if we set max image size, and let me show you what that's doing so you can see it. There's this thing called controls at the top, which has some gross little inline JavaScript. But what it's doing is it's setting a custom property called max image size to the checked value of that checkbox just on the root element, which would be the, the HTML element here. And then that property name, max image size, if it happens to be true, which we're checking, then we set max width 100%. Otherwise, it's just the user agent styles for the image. So I feel like these type of lines are very often applied to images and reset style sheets and stuff. What we're looking at here, that's not applied, but if we apply it, then I feel like it comes into reality with probably most websites and how they operate. So it happens as we expect in the 50% column. It's like we're forcing the image to be only as wide as the column if it happens to be bigger. So it's being smashed down. But in auto, it's still, it's not necessarily getting smaller. It's still dealing with the intrinsic size of the image. Whereas with 1FR, the behavior is totally different. It's like, I can be maxed with 100%, so I don't need to force the column to be bigger. I'm not required to force that column to be bigger. I'm just gonna, I don't know, be essentially half the space again. So that's nice behavior, I think. So many reset style sheets and just CSS in general tells images to not cause blowouts. Like we've been dealing with that forever. That's cool to see that behavior there. And then, this is the one I mentioned too, is that it's allowed to get smaller if it needs to, that kind of thing. Pretty nice. So images, can definitely mess with things in a way. Where else do we need to go with this? So images are a useful beast here. I think it'd be fun to play with that because we were just reading about auto and min content and max content and all that kind of thing. What would it happen? Should we add another column that has to do with the where we can just play with that? Let's just make a 6th one, and we'll just use 6 to play with a little bit. So there's number 6, and it starts in that basic content kind of thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're gonna do one more .6, and it's gonna have grid template columns that we're about to play with, and then the before element that labels it just for our own look-ins will just be like having fun. Cool. And those columns could be, what do you think we're going to get when we say, if both columns were like min content, min content, min content, min content. Another way to write that would be to repeat it too, in case you haven't seen that. Repeat to min content. That's a valid value there. Saves us from repeating ourselves. Look, there's smashed all the way to the left. The min content of text I always find very strange too. Like it knows that it shouldn't break a word in between the word, but it's like whatever the widest word that it can't break is, smashes that all the way down. But I think it might actually be like, we'll keep the syntax. Even max content isn't that wide for this small text kind of thing. Like now it's only can be as wide as the longest content too. That's interesting. So if we had that really long paragraph, it's absolutely going to like blow out that last column when we make it a really long paragraph. It's going to be like, I won't wrap at all. I'm just going to be the world's longest column because that's the maximum content of text. Text is just the weirdest thing to deal with. Let's see what's going on in comments. Hi, David. Good to see you here. 2.0 is looking great. Curious what the second tab in the left sidebar is. The second tab in the left sidebar is the build process for this particular pen. So we're using TypeScript, but we're barely using it here. But if we had I don't know, an event in here, we could be like mouse event or something. And you can see TypeScript now processing this file and giving us the output. But if we were to screw that up or something, we'd see the TypeScript processing fail, and it'll show us what line and what's going on, and there'll be diagnostics helping us figure out that stuff. This is all kind of a bit new to CodePen's new editor. But yeah, and as you have more technologies that you're processing with the pen, we are dynamically building the build process and showing you the stuff that we're doing and whether there's problems or not and how fast and long it's taking and all that. Yeah, that's what's going on in that tab in the new editor. Pretty cool. Andrew's saying, I've definitely hit things where changing a column from auto to fit content fixes things, but not always clear on why. Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm hoping to play with this to like give myself some more insight too. Like to me, this min-max one was kind of revolutionary, that things tended to behave a little better when I like allowed columns to shrink. And I think that's probably maybe what's happening to you too, is that it's like, as you use those keywords in different situations, that it fixes it because they behave differently than the FR units do. And FR units, as logical as they tend to be, are still a little bit weird. And for whatever reason, don't have like quote unquote permission to be smaller, even though sometimes it's appropriate for them to be small. Okay, so max content was weird. Probably not terribly useful there, but maybe in context of like, I don't know, maybe instead of that min max there, we could use, for example, min content here. So it's not going to smash a column any smaller than the intrinsic size. Maybe that's a way to go. Interesting idea, right? There's also fit content, which is wild too. Maybe we could take a moment to read those because we're trying to get smarter here. So let's start with max content is a keyword representing the maximal content contribution. The MCC, obviously. I love that there's going to be an entire spec dedicated to talking about that. A box's ideal size, given access when there's given infinite available space. Oh, that's lovely. So it's like a p tag in a infinite space. Of course it doesn't wrap. It has infinite space available to it. So it's a keyword representing the maximal content contribution of the grid items occupying the grid track. So if the first element of the grid track contains the sentence, Greek text or whatever that is, and the second element contains a smaller bit of that text, the maximum content will be this first sentence. So that's good to know too. I guess we didn't spell that out very specifically, but let's say there's 50 elements in the grid. Max content is going to find which of those 50 elements has the largest of the maximum size given infinite area and make it for the whole column. It's going to be based on that largest one. And I guess min content would be the other way around, right? It represents the minimum content contribution, but I guess it's both trying to find the biggest one, right? In min content, it's not going to be it won't be sized based on the smallest one. It's kind of based on the biggest one still. But if the biggest one was smashed as small as it could go, the biggest of the small ones, I guess. There's some kind of like makes intuitive sense what min content and max content are. A little more confusing what fit content is. Do they talk about that in here? Ooh, they do. This one's going to be a doozy. This one freaks me out. Represents a formula, which is the maximum of the minimum or the minimum between the limit and max content. We could maybe figure that out, except for I have no idea what limit is, where minimum represents an auto minimum. Fair enough, the intrinsic size, I guess, which is often but not always equal to a min content minimum. Kind of makes sense too. Those images were causing grid blowouts for us, but they were trying to be as small as they could be. Like when an image blows out a column, it's like it's doing it because it has to, in a way. Like, you know, it's like that's how big I am, so I guess that's how big we're going to be. I don't have like whatever permission or any information that anybody wants me to be any smaller. At the limit, the track sizing function passed an argument to, and the limit is the track sizing function passed to an argument to fit content. Is it like cyclical then? This is essentially calculated as the smaller of two different min max. So it's the min of these two min max functions. Yeah, that's just too much for my brain to handle. When do you use fit content then? I guess that's worth a play, right? Like, what is fit content useful? Let's do it with our limited set of stuff in the having fun column below here. So now we've got it set. Did it rebuild? I feel like it, yeah, there it goes. So in having fun, oh, it's broken. Grid content columns repeat to fit content. Did not like that. Don't like it. Why don't you like it? Grids. Fit content is not a valid keyword just all by itself for two columns. Does it just not work in repeat, or does it not work at all? Funny. Why is it here then? Is there a support chart that says it's not cool? Fit content is not really one of these. Clearly it doesn't like it though. Maybe it's only, their fit content it has parens on it. Were we just using it wrong? Oh, you have to like give it, I totally misunderstood. So you have to give it a value, fit content. I thought it was a keyword. Is it a keyword in other circumstances? Oh no, okay. It's a CS function, clamps to a given size to an available size according to the formula, blah. Okay. What's the reasonable size to give it then? Can you give it a keyword? Oh, it doesn't seem like any of these demos are doing that. Like fit content, min content, does that make sense? Or would you just use min content then? The function can be used as a track size in CSS Grid. Subtle. Jeez. It's not exactly screaming out at use cases, is it? They're doing the same kind of thing. They're like, we'll put a really long paragraph in there and see how it goes. Ooh, okay. Item is as wide as the content. Fair enough. Why is it as wide as the content? Because of fit content 300 pixels? Oh, interesting. So it's like, this is clearly less than 300 pixels, but it says fit content, so it's like being forced downwards a little bit. Is that what's going on? Yeah. Item with more text in it, because the contents of it are wider than the maximum width, it's clamped at 300. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And then the last one is clearly could be much smaller, but it's not using fit content. It's just using the rest of the available space. How interesting. Yeah, how these things smash together is quite interesting. So let's have a play with that then, I guess. So it's fit content. You pass in a value that ends up kind of clamping it. Fun. So fit content like, I don't know, 100 pixels. And we'll do that twice. That should work. I did not know this going into this stream. I did not know fit content was like a function like that. And does it work? Yes. But it's because I guess so. Let's verify it though. Yeah, it's rendering and using that. So it's re-rendered again. The build just took a second, I guess. Still in beta. Relax. So what's going on? I said to be 100 pixels, and it is being 100 pixels, even though it could be more than that. So it's like, in this particular case, it's wrapping. So it's not willing to get any bigger. I thought it was willing to get bigger. Like this one was willing to get bigger, but it's only willing to get bigger like if it feels like it needs to get bigger. Okay. And then the other one, it behaves the same because we're just doing two of the same columns. So if we flip to the one with lots of text in it, ooh, it still smashed itself down to 100 pixels. Weird. So what's going on in this one where it was happy to go bigger? Oh, it's never happy to be bigger. It's never happy to be bigger. Fit content is always going to be at most the size of the value that you pass into the function, but it is happy to get smaller, which is weird because I thought that's what min-max did. So yeah, but anyway, that's pretty mind-bending. It's like good to know that it exists, I guess, but it's definitely going to be one of those ones that you reach for when you're like, I'm having huge problems with this grid and I don't know how to solve it, so I'm just going to try fit content, I guess. But to me, it reads as min-max. Like this needs to be bigger, but it can't be because we're going to max it out at 300, and this one didn't need to be 300, so it just didn't take up that much. Okay, well, that's a thing. We should definitely will it take percentages? I am still a little fascinated by it. Like, what is that cool? Is it going to have the same problem as the... No, this is the case where it's happy to be... No, it can't be bigger. Now I'm wondering if that rendered correctly. Is that really, or is 50% not a okay value? What if it's 100%? Yeah, I think you're right, Andrew. It's like, it's min-max, except for auto's the minimum, and it doesn't otherwise allow that. Why can't I change this on the fly? 100 doesn't do anything because maybe it just doesn't like percentages in there. That's the trade-off perhaps. I don't know. So if don't we already have a min-max one? So this column here will just temporarily change to have like auto be the minimum and just see if it is like cool with that. And our guess here is that it's not even going to allow that. Like that's not a valid value for min-max, which is very possible. It is though. Bummer. It could just be that there's some overlap in what these functions can do. Not terribly rare for CSS to have a little bit of overlap on stuff. Maybe it's older, maybe it predates min-max in some way. Not super sure. Okay, so let's play with padding a little bit. We didn't even really see that at all. So if we change, I guess we'll go to the image one and start adding padding to it. Any surprises with 50%, 50%? There is actually a little bit to me. I mean, maybe, I think we're used to the idea that you have to set, box sizing border box or whatever if you want the padding to essentially take out from the inside of a component. Otherwise, it tends to force something bigger. Like without setting box sizing border box, and you set an element to 100% wide or something, and then you added padding, it would be more than 100% wide because that's just how that tends to work. I sort of thought because of the sturdiness of here that padding would also push a column bigger. Having these columns add up to more than 100% when there's padding, but it's just not. It seems sort of like they just decided to fix that with grid. It is listed as one of the CSS mistakes is the box sizing thing. Box sizing should be border box by default. Can I point at things in streams? Ooh, my finger gets cut off. Box sizing should be border box by default, which I think we all agree with, right? It seems like that's just how it works in grid anyway. They just take the padding out from inside of columns, whether there's no box sizing in use in this pen. Ooh, just kidding. There absolutely is. That's very embarrassing. I don't think it's going to change anything, though. That's hilarious. Now re-render, please. Is the build process taking a minute? Why is it not? Maybe it's injecting the CSS or something. So there's the image. It's going to behave the same way, even now that I've properly removed. Oh gosh. Hope I'm still right. Padding. Yes. Behavior, the same. It does not make 50% wider by adding padding to it, even though you'd think that it would. So like, that's what I mean by fix it. I think they're like, we'll just make this. Oh gosh, now I'm noticing a typo. 2 dashes in padding. That better not affect it. I don't actually think these matter anymore. I was just, earlier I was struggling with trying to, a property wasn't working quite as I thought it was. And I'm like, well, maybe if I define it, then it will work. But I don't think these things actually need to be defined the way that I'm using them. Remember the TypeScript that I wrote here was just like, actually, it's not even related to that. I got away with not writing any JavaScript in a JavaScript file at all because it's a range input and it had one line of code it needed to write. So I'm like, I'm just going to put it on the onInput value. So it changes padding, but I kind of like didn't want to put pixels here or something, or I like wanted to play with that idea. If you don't put plus px at the end of it, then it comes over as, you know, an integer between 0 and 40, which is cool, right? But then you can't use 40 for padding because that's a unitless number. Fortunately, in CSS, you can just multiply it with calc by 1 pixel and it turns it into the value that you need it to be. That seemed to work fine. But it took me a minute to figure that out. And then I was like, it feels almost easier to just apply the pixels in JavaScript and just let it work. So I think if I get rid of the definitions of these properties here, it's not going to affect anything at all. It's being a little slow on the redrawing here, isn't it? Maybe a refresh is in order or something. But yeah, it works. The padding works fine without defining it. You know what my bug was though? Is that I'm starting to have these syntaxes like up in my mind. Like, what are the different syntaxes? It's angle and length, and I don't know, there's some more. Length is the most useful one, obviously, is that because they're in my brain, I wrote them like that, and I didn't catch that the syntax highlighting was a little weird or whatever. So it looks right. I was staring at them like, is this wrong? Is there a weird space in here? Do you have to put the 2 dashes or do you not put the 2 dashes? Did something screw up? Like, I was scrutinizing every character of this. And it turned out it was just the quotes. You have to put the quotes around the syntax thing. Just a little weird, I guess, but that's what fixed it, even though we just proved that we don't even need it at all. Okay. Kind of interesting. Ooh, we broke one. Maybe it does matter that gap was defined. Now if we make gap, does it start to work? Yeah, okay, interesting. So when we load the page, if gap is not defined, the way that we're using gap is on grid. Just up a little bit, isn't it? On grid, it's display grid, and gap gets defined, but there's no fallback. And okay, I guess that's fine, but gap is used when we're defining the columns. Ooh, and the fallback is 0 on it. So it's 0 divided by 2, which I think is an invalid value. So calc minus a unitless value is maybe is invalid. Look at it. It's not making a grid. That's the thing that I noticed here. So calc minus a unitless value is an invalid grid. It didn't cross off the whole thing, though. It's just calculating it wrong or something. Like this gets calculated to be 100% or auto or something. That's funny that it's invalid. But if we define it up here, is that going to immediately make it work? The initial value is still 0. Stupid comments. Yeah, it's still broken, but what if the initial value was like 5 pixels? Then I bet it'll pop in and work. No. Gap. But if you give it a little gap here, it starts to work. If I remove the gap, does it continue working? What was so invalid about that syntax? That is a weird, I'm very sure it's my code and not a bug or something. But if gap is undefined, if I take that off, does it stop working? Yeah, we're saying it's got to be 0 pixels, but it can never be 0 pixels because it's defined as having an initial value of 5 pixels. So why would it ever be undefined? How strange. Oh, an errant quote. Thanks, Andrew. God, you'd think that would go through. If this CSS was being processed by anything other than, this is just nothing. It's just vanilla CSS. So it, oh, look, we just shipped this. This is interesting. I was like, oh, holy crap. Did I accidentally share a URL where there's a bunch of collaborators? The idea is because I'm on this is a team-owned pen, all of the team-owned people are automatically editors of the pen, and you can't even have them not be because that's just how teams work. But that's new. They must have shipped that late last week while I was gone. Sweet. Yeah, thanks. It would have caught that, but instead we needed Andrew's eyes to catch it instead. But I wonder if we put on, would a block would have caught it? Would style lint have caught that? I'm going to add it to the pen, which you'll now see as one of the linters in the process. Ooh, there's a bunch of stuff it doesn't like. Unexpected white space at the end of the line. Boy, that's a little picky. But if we didn't like that, we could just go into the config for it and fix it, right? White, is there a white space thing? Oh no. It just means we'd have to look it up and figure out what configuration that is and then add it to our config to get it to stop complaining about it. But that's just how configurable processors on CodePen are now, huh? Who's impressed? And just a little too much space there. Or is it, what are you complaining about? Unexpected, oh yeah, it wants an empty line before the rule. And now there's too much space. That's the one that gets me in this. We have some Ruby code in CodePen. Oh my God, what are you complaining about? Meh. Oh, it likes one extra little space at the bottom of it. Yeah, this linter tool we have in CodePen, Rubocop, constantly bitches me about little stuff like that, but I haven't got it configured in my VS Code properly, so I'd only find out in CI. Obnoxious. All right, would it have caught the errant quote? Go style lint. No. Wow. That's fun. I mean, it caught it, but it's like you'd look at this error and be like, I don't have an unclosed string. I opened it and closed it, but it's probably, and then why wouldn't it have caught it here? It caught it there with a quote opened there. Yay, that is weird. Wow. I probably will have to log that one as like, can we look into that? Because you'd think, why is it being caught on the, I guess it's the last quote. It's not the first additional quote that it found. It's like, it's trying to find matching quotes. And by the time it gets to this one, now we have an odd number of double quotes. And so that's where it throws the error. Ugh. It'd be sure nice if it caught it up here, but I guess maybe it just can't. All right, but now the gap has an initial value. That's probably going to be fine here now. Yeah, that's fine. I guess that's a good reason to use at property in CSS at all, I guess, is that you can always provide an initial value that's of the correct type so that things don't fail in weird ways. Like the fact that this fails at all is a little strange to me, and I guess we could get rid of that because you'll never need a fallback because it'll always be something. It's impossible for it not to be something when you've defined it. That'd be something like stylelint could check for, probably. I don't think stylelint is that actively maintained, but it's like if you set one of these, I don't think it would ever need the fallback. Yeah, maybe that's not true. Maybe there's some edge case where like you could unset it or revert layer it or something and remove whatever this applies. I don't know. CSS is complicated. Cool. Well, let's see if there's anything else ascertain that's interesting about the way grid columns are done. We started with padding, right? We'll do this, some padding. That's interesting. The auto column is getting smaller when we apply padding because it's forcing the image to be smaller, and I guess that's enough to make the entire column smaller. Or is it? No, it's probably less about the image and more about the column on the right, where it's the edges are being forced in that, and it's forcing the column to the left of it to have to be how it needs to be. You'd think it would, at some point, it would choose to wrap. So again, it's one of these like unknowable things of CSS. Like when is it decided that it's cool to wrap and when is it not? Because there's certainly no like white space, no wrap put on this or anything. It's just, I don't know. When that decides to wrap is an absolute mystery. But 1FR is kind of holding up strong. There's nothing that's forcing these columns to be any bigger or smaller, so it's just behaving how you want it to be. That's probably why like most columns in the world are probably just set with FR units. It's because they haven't had a grid blowout situation or anything that's forcing them to be kind of an unknown size. FR units are probably just the way to go. I think that's why it's taught mostly, and that you sprinkle in other things as you need it. Like if you know a column only needs to be 50 pixels, why do you make it 50 pixels? And then you use FR units in addition to that takes up the remaining space. It's just when like auto gets involved and these other keywords that things really do get confusing in a way. Okay. Well, I'm not sure we like slathered on the interestingness of these grids, but I think if I play with it some more, I'll come up with something a little bit more interesting to say about it. Perhaps auto is the weirdest thing to say. It's the one that behaves the most kind of unpredictably, I guess, but certainly has its use cases. What other than an image though? It's almost like the insight is like, don't use auto with text only content because unpredictable. If you used with something like IMG as a child, it becomes more predictable. It's like you know what the intrinsic size of an image is or can check pretty quick, and that's what auto becomes. So fair enough there. So gap behaving like we expected to. Let's get to the weird one though. So heavy gap, heavy padding, anything behaving weirdly? Yeah, not particularly. I guess I should label that one because it was interesting enough to keep, right? So grid 6 was not just having fun anymore, just using fit content. What's a more interesting value to put there? It's the one that can't go over this value, right? No. What was happening there? I was trying to paste. I just had something weird on my clipboard, I think. So those are going to be clamped at 100 pixels, right? So it's maybe more interesting to call it like 500, 500. It's like you put a minimum in there. What will happen? Will it be a blowout? No, it's happy to shrink, but just not get bigger. What an interesting value. I'm gonna sleep on that one. I kind of don't hate it, but I can't decide why. Yeah, there it is, becoming its full 500, but no larger. Cool. Well, let's put that to bed for a moment. I had this other demo that I blue skied the other day. We're just going to totally switch gears. Shall we just switch gears for a moment? And it was somebody that had wrote into with a blog post they wanted for front-end masters, and it was okay, but it was just such a small concept, and it was like such a hugely long article about this that I was like, I I can't edit. I can't begin to do this. So I'm kind of, in a way, stealing their idea, but it's just spelled out really clearly in the spec. So the blog post is kind of like just pointing to that idea. The idea was that there is a colon open concept, and it's related to details, but it has different things. So if I go details open, what do you think that selects? It selects freaking details elements when they're open. So here's a details element, summary. It feels like, oh, it's because I'm in the kind of the old CodePen here, which has the AI tools work in it. So I think I have the Windsurf plugin on, and it's so fast that even it catches before Emmett does. Are you sure you want to know? No, I just want to be like summary, and then, yeah, it's a sled, fine. So it's going to render another details down here, right? Where's the other details? Why isn't that one rendering? It's because there's so many other styles. I was trying to demo something unrelated, but if I just comment out the entire world of CSS, this will now just render fine, right? Summary, it was a sled, cool. And details open is, I don't know, background red, so everybody can really see it clearly. It's red when it's open and it's white when it's not. So we have colon open in CSS. That's a thing. They call them pseudo classes. Great. It also happens to work like this because it's one of those HTML elements that replicates an attribute back to the HTML when it's open or not. So that should still work. I think that maybe worked first in CSS. So I feel like I see that more commonly, or my fingers reach to it more commonly, but that also exists too. They have the same specificity, I guess. Not a big deal. But what's interesting about that is now, because details has it, that means popover elements couldn't use it. And they can't because a details element can be a popover, which is like, when would you ever want that? But I like just forced the world's stupidest use case here to demonstrate it. So we'll get rid of that and uncomment the rest of the world's CSS and look at it quickly first. So we have a details element. The details element has the popover attribute on it, which I feel like is going to be like pretty rare in the world of details, but hey, any element can be a popover. That's the strength. It's not like I'm advocating that they should not allow it. I just do think it's kind of weird. So because it's a details element, it needs an open state too. And because they can't use open, because open would mean, what do you mean? Do you mean that itself as a popover is open, or do you mean that the details element is open? Because they couldn't do that, they had to invent this new one, popover open. So now we can select popovers when it's in its open state. So to come up with a demo that uses both open and popover open on the same element was a little tricky, but the demo that I put together was like, it's kind of like a double opt-in for a spoiler. You'd put the spoiler behind the popover comes up, it's a details element, and you also have to click open the details element to do that. So it's just kind of a double spoiler popover. Don't hate it, I suppose. Brian had to jump, but I'm just looking at chat a moment. Apparently it's WWDC keynote. That's cool. I might jump off and watch that too while I do some other work. But he did ask, could CodePen have an AI assistant someday like Copilot? Absolutely, it could. It probably should. That's what that Windsurf thing has going on. See, it's doing the gray text type ahead stuff for me here. That's just, hopefully, does it show popovers in Arc? I like click to open a little window, and I feel like sometimes when you share windows, it doesn't show stuff like that. It indeed doesn't. Or is the stream just behind? Anyway, it was called Windsurf, and I feel like they did a pretty good job with an AI plugin that happens to work on CodePen and some other editors on the web. I'm happy with that. It'd be cool if it worked in the new editor. It doesn't, because it's a matter of CodeMirror 5 versus CodeMirror 6, and it just doesn't work. I emailed them about it. You know, maybe we could contribute to that work as too. I'm just not sure. But yeah, it doesn't work at the moment. But should CodePen just build something in ourselves? Yeah, I've seen demos of that we've played with ourselves and other people that have kind of hacked one in there to work. Kind of cool. But we're really busy with the 2.0 editor. I want to get that released first, and then we'll see if there's any AI that makes sense for CodePen. Obviously, I can picture it. It sounds like you can too. But layered into this is this idea of the animation happening both when the popover opens and when the details opens. I think that's kind of interesting, right? Like this thing comes flying in from the top and it flies out from the bottom. So the details element is, this element here is kind of naturally positioned in the middle of the screen and all that kind of stuff. But we're saying we want to transition everything and apply the allow discrete keyword here. Such a dumb keyword, but that's the thing. It's because it's being transitioned from display none and display block or whatever it is naturally. You have to put that so that it is allowed to be animated in, essentially. And then you say, okay, well, it's hidden by default, but when it's open, then you can see it. And it's pushed away a little bit naturally, but when it's open, it's just in the middle again. So you're like kind of undoing those styles when the popover is open. But in order to have it work on the way in, you have to use starting style. So it's a little, and notice the translate is actually different here than it is here. That's how those two values can be different. That's why it can feel repetitive. It feels silly to have to replicate the opacity. Actually, shouldn't the opacity be 0? Yeah, it comes in from opacity 0 and moves out. So it feels weird to have to repeat yourself in this case, but you just have to because sometimes it can be different. So there we are with that. And details content can happen the same way. You can like animate the height of details content now and stuff. Really kind of impressive. And I made the red thing come in with animation. It's just a pseudo element and it has its own starting style. So it scales up and just has that subtle little animation because of starting style. It's kind of fun to think about the things where you can sprinkle in starting styles of things. So I don't know. That felt like just barely interesting enough to make a demo for, but it isn't particularly cool, nor do I feel like it's worth a full blog post necessarily. So I just marked it as kind of a fun thing to mention on a stream, perhaps. Anyway, thanks for hanging out for a little while. I'm kind of, sort of hoping to just do this every day. There's just plenty of ideas of things to poke through, and we can just hang out together and chat and build stuff, and that's the plan. But I'm going to sign off for now. Eventually, I'll learn how to stream for real. We'll like raid somebody else's channel. Is that a thing? Anyway.